a crowded city bus on a rainy Tuesday evening. Passengers crammed shoulder to shoulder, irritated by the weather, exhausted from long workdays. And there, in the back corner, sat a man who didn't speak. Beside him, a golden retriever service dog, calm and dignified. Within minutes, the mockery began. Cruel laughter, whispered insults. One passenger even filmed him on their phone, planning to post it online for cheap entertainment. But what those passengers didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that the silent man they were mocking had once commanded soldiers in the most dangerous corners of the world. And before this bus ride ended, every single person aboard would learn a lesson they'd never forget. This is a true story about dignity, sacrifice, and the moment when a hero revealed himself in the most unexpected way. If you believe in standing up for those who've sacrificed everything for us, hit that like button right now. And subscribe, because stories like this need to be heard. Let's dive in. It was 6:47 p.m. in downtown Seattle. The number 7 bus was packed beyond capacity, as it always was during rush hour. Rain hammered against the windows, creating rivers that streamed down the glass. The air inside was thick with dampness, body heat, and the collective exhaustion of people who just wanted to get home. Captain James Morrison sat in the back row, his service dog Ranger lying peacefully at his feet. James was 38 years old, though his eyes carried the weight of someone much older. His face bore no expression as he stared out the rain-streaked window, lost in thoughts only he could understand. Ranger, a 3-year-old golden retriever, wore his service vest proudly. His training was impeccable. He didn't react to the crowd, the noise, or the chaos around him. He simply existed as a steady, calming presence for the man who needed him most. It started quietly, as these things often do. 2 teenage boys near the middle of the bus noticed James and Ranger. One of them nudged the other, pointing with his chin toward the back. "Dude, look at that guy," one whispered, not quite quietly enough. "He's just sitting there like a statue. Creepy," his friend snickered. "And he brought his dog on the bus? There are like 50 people standing, and this guy's dog gets floor space?" A woman in business attire overheard and glanced back. Her lips tightened with disapproval. She didn't say anything, but her expression spoke volumes. James didn't react. He'd learned not to. Ranger's tail gave a single, gentle thump against the floor, sensing his owner's tension even when no one else could. 3 stops later, a man in his mid-40s boarded the bus. His name was Derek, and he worked in middle management at a tech company. He was the kind of person who felt powerful by making others feel small. Derek immediately noticed the crowded conditions. His eyes landed on James and Ranger in the back corner. "Seriously?" Derek announced loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "We've got people standing in the aisles, and this guy's got his emotional support peacock taking up space?" A few passengers chuckled. The teenagers from earlier laughed outright. "It's a dog," one of them called out. "An emotional support dog." "Emotional support," Derek repeated mockingly. "Back in my day, we called that being soft. You couldn't handle real life, so you need a puppy to hold your hand?" James's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His hands, resting on his knees, curled slightly, but he remained silent. An elderly woman near the front spoke up timidly. "Sir, that's a service dog. You can see the vest. He's allowed to be here." Derek rolled his eyes dramatically. "Oh, I know he's allowed. Doesn't mean it's not ridiculous. Look at the guy. He looks perfectly fine to me. Probably gaming the system for sympathy points." A young woman, probably in her early 20s, pulled out her phone. She angled it toward James and Ranger, clearly recording. "This is going straight to TikTok," she said to her friend beside her. "Watch this get like 1 million views while entitled guy takes up bus space with his fake service dog while everyone else stands." Her friend giggled. "Add some sad music. It'll be perfect." James finally moved. His eyes shifted from the window to the young woman's phone. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Not anger, but deep, profound sadness. Ranger noticed immediately. The dog shifted closer, pressing against James's leg. His training kicked in, performing the deep pressure therapy he'd been taught. But even Ranger seemed to sense that something was different this time. His usually calm eyes held a hint of concern. The bus driver, an older black man named Marcus who'd been driving this route for 15 years, glanced in his rearview mirror. He'd seen the whole thing unfold. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Derek wasn't finished. He pushed through the crowded aisle until he stood directly in front of James. "Hey, buddy," Derek said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You gonna say something? Or are you too traumatized by, what, someone looking at you wrong? Is that what the dog is for? Because someone hurt your feelings once?" The bus went quiet. Even the teenagers stopped laughing. There was something uncomfortable about watching this now, something that felt less like entertainment and more like cruelty. James slowly raised his eyes to meet Derek's, and then he spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "I don't want any trouble." Derek smirked. "See? He can talk. So what's the dog for then, huh? What's so wrong with you that you need a service animal?" Before James could respond, a voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." Everyone turned. Marcus, the bus driver, had pulled the bus to the side of the road. He put it in park and stood up, his considerable frame filling the narrow aisle. "I said, that's enough," Marcus repeated, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from decades of dealing with difficult people. Derek scoffed. "Are you serious right now? I'm just asking a question. Free speech, buddy." "Free speech doesn't mean free from consequences," Marcus replied calmly. "And on my bus, you don't get to harass passengers. Especially not—" He paused, looking at James with something that might have been recognition. "Especially not people who've sacrificed more than you could possibly understand." Derek laughed. "Oh, please. What, you know this guy? You his friend or something?" Marcus shook his head. "Never met him before in my life. But I know what I'm looking at." He pointed to a small, barely visible pin on James's jacket collar. "That's a combat infantry badge, and if I'm not mistaken, that's a ranger tab on his backpack." The bus went silent. "You want to know what the dog is for?" Marcus continued, his voice softer now, but no less powerful. "That dog is for PTSD. That dog is for the nightmares that don't stop when you wake up. That dog is for the panic attacks that can hit out of nowhere because a car backfired, or because someone got too loud, or because the world got too crowded and chaotic and suddenly you're not on a bus in Seattle anymore. You're back in whatever hell you survived." James closed his eyes. A tear tracked down his cheek, which he quickly wiped away. "You don't have to," the elderly woman from earlier said gently to Marcus. But James shook his head. He took a deep breath and opened his eyes. "It's okay," James said quietly. Maybe they should know." He paused, gathering himself. Ranger moved to rest his head on James's knee, providing that grounding presence. "My name is Captain James Morrison. I served 3 tours in Afghanistan with the 75th Ranger Regiment. I led a platoon of 37 men and women." His voice was steady now, though quiet. The entire bus leaned in to hear him. "On my last tour, we were conducting a humanitarian mission. We were bringing medical supplies to a village that had been cut off by Taliban forces. It was supposed to be a straightforward operation. Get in, deliver the supplies, get out." James's hands began to tremble slightly. Ranger immediately responded, applying more pressure against his leg. "We were ambushed. The entire village was a trap. IEDs, sniper fire, RPGs, everything they had. The firefight lasted 7 hours. 7 hours of hell. We called for evac, but the weather was too bad. Sandstorm. We were on our own. The young woman who'd been filming had lowered her phone. Tears were streaming down her face. 17 of my soldiers died that day, James continued, his voice cracking. 17 people I knew. People I laughed with, trained with, promised I'd bring home safe. And I couldn't. I held them while they bled out in the sand. I listened to them call for their mothers, their wives, their children, and there was nothing I could do. I was wounded too, shrapnel from an IED. I should have died. Sometimes I wish I had. The elderly woman gasped softly, covering her mouth. But I survived, James said. Physically, I recovered. The scars are mostly hidden. But the other wounds, the ones you can't see, those never healed. I came home to a hero's welcome. Medals, ceremonies, handshakes from generals. But every night I'm back in that village, I hear the explosions. I see their faces. I smell the blood and smoke and burning metal. He paused, his breathing uneven. For 2 years after I came home, I didn't leave my apartment. I couldn't be around people. Loud noises sent me into panic attacks. I'd wake up screaming, convinced I was still there. I pushed away everyone who tried to help, my family, my friends, other veterans. I was drowning in guilt and shame, and I didn't think I deserved to be saved. Derek had gone pale. He'd moved back, pressing himself against the side of the bus. I tried to end it, James said simply, 3 times. Each time, something stopped me. The last time, it was thinking about those 17 soldiers, what they would say if they knew I gave up after surviving when they didn't get that chance. That's when the VA connected me with a service dog program. I didn't think it would help. I didn't think anything would help. But I agreed to try. James looked down at Ranger, and for the first time, a small smile crossed his face. They paired me with Ranger, this goofy, loving golden retriever who somehow understood me better than I understood myself. He wakes me from nightmares before they get too bad. He can sense when I'm about to have a panic attack, sometimes before I can, and he intervenes. He creates space for me in crowds. He reminds me that I'm here now in Seattle, not back in that village. He reached down and gently scratched Ranger behind the ears. The dog's tail wagged contentedly. Ranger gave me my life back. He's the reason I can leave my apartment. He's the reason I can ride this bus. He's the reason I'm still alive. James looked up at the passengers, meeting their eyes one by one. So when people mock him, mock me for needing him, mock the idea that someone who looks fine might be fighting battles you can't see, it doesn't just hurt. It reminds me of every person who didn't understand. Every person who said, "Get over it." Every person who made me feel like I was weak for surviving trauma. The bus remained silent for a long moment after James finished speaking. Then Derek, the man who'd started it all, stepped forward. His face was red, tears streaming down his cheeks. Derek's voice broke. "Sir, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." James nodded slowly. "Thank you." "No," Derek insisted. "You don't understand. My little brother served in Iraq. He came home different. We didn't understand. We thought he just needed to tough it out. We thought he was being dramatic when he said he couldn't handle crowds, couldn't handle loud noises. We made jokes about him needing therapy, about him being soft." Derek's shoulders shook with sobs. "He killed himself 2 years ago, and we never told him it was okay to not be okay. We never validated what he was going through. We made him feel ashamed for struggling." The bus driver, Marcus, moved to put a hand on Derek's shoulder. "I became everything I hate," Derek said, looking at James with devastated eyes. "I became the people who killed my brother with their ignorance and cruelty, and I did it to you. to someone who deserved compassion and respect. James stood up slowly. Ranger stood with him, alert but calm. "Your brother's death wasn't your fault," James said quietly. "PTSD is a disease. It kills people just like cancer kills people. You didn't know. But now you do. And what you do with that knowledge, that's what matters." Derek nodded, wiping his eyes. "What can I do? How can I make this right?" The young woman who'd been filming stepped forward. She'd been crying silently, her phone still in her hand. "I deleted the video," she said, her voice small. "I'm so sorry, sir. I was going to post it to make fun of you, to get likes from strangers who don't matter. I'm disgusted with myself." James looked at her kindly. "What's your name?" "Emily." "Emily, you're young. You made a mistake. We all make mistakes. The question is, do you learn from them?" Emily nodded emphatically. "Yes, sir. I promise. I'm going to do better. I'm going to be better." The teenagers from earlier approached hesitantly. "Sir," one of them said, his voice cracking with emotion, "we're sorry too. What we did was messed up. Our teacher at school always tells us to respect veterans, and we didn't even think." "Thank you," James said. "Just remember that veterans don't always look like what you expect. We're not all wearing uniforms or carrying flags. Sometimes we're just quiet people on a bus with our service dogs, trying to make it through another day." One by one, nearly every passenger on the bus approached James. They apologized. They thanked him for his service. They shared their own stories of family members with PTSD, of struggles with invisible illnesses, of times they'd been judged for things people couldn't see. The elderly woman, who'd been the only one to speak up initially, reached James last. She took his hand in both of hers. "My husband was a Vietnam veteran," she said softly. "He struggled for 40 years with PTSD before he passed. No one understood then. People called him crazy, called him weak. He would have loved to have had a companion like your Ranger." She reached down and petted Ranger gently. "Thank you for speaking up. You helped more people today than you know." The bus driver, Marcus, finally spoke up again. "I need to tell you all something too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was a Marine, served in Desert Storm. When I came home, I was angry all the time. Couldn't keep a job, couldn't maintain relationships. I ended up homeless for 3 years, living under a bridge downtown." Shocked silence greeted this revelation. Marcus, always cheerful and professional, had hidden this from everyone. "A Vietnam vet found me one day," Marcus continued. "Guy was volunteering with a homeless outreach program. He recognized the signs of PTSD because he'd lived it himself. He got me into treatment, helped me find housing, helped me get this job. He saved my life." Marcus's eyes were wet now. He told me, "Pass it on. When you see someone struggling, you help them. You speak up for them. You be the voice they might not have." So when I saw what was happening to you, Captain Morrison, I couldn't stay silent. That would have betrayed everything that man did for me." James stood and walked to the front of the bus. He extended his hand to Marcus. The two men shook hands, then embraced. "Thank you," James said simply. "No," Marcus replied. "Thank you for your service, for your sacrifice, and for having the courage to speak your truth today." As Marcus returned to his driver's seat and prepared to continue the route, a commotion erupted outside the bus. Through the rain-streaked windows, passengers could see a car that had crashed into a light pole. Smoke was beginning to pour from under the hood. And worse, trapped in the back seat was a small child, screaming. The child's mother was frantically trying to open the door, but the crash had jammed it shut. The front of the car was crumpled, and flames were now visible. "Oh my God," Emily gasped. That baby. Without a word, James moved. He didn't run. His injuries prevented that. But he moved with purpose, Ranger at his side, off the bus and into the rain. Captain James Morrison assessed the situation in seconds. His military training, dormant for years, activated instantly. "You!" He pointed to Derek. "Call 911. Tell them we need fire and EMS immediately. Car fire with a trapped victim." Derek fumbled for his phone, fingers shaking, and made the call. James approached the frantic mother. "Ma'am, I need you to step back. I'm going to get your child out." "The door won't open," she sobbed. "It's jammed and there's fire." "I see it. How old is your child?" "3. She's 3. Please." James circled the car. The driver's side was crushed. The passenger side doors were jammed. But the rear window, it was cracked but not shattered. He turned to the teenage boys. "You two, I need you to help that woman away from the car. Keep her calm. Can you do that?" They nodded and gently guided the mother back. Marcus appeared with a fire extinguisher from the bus. "For the flames." "Good thinking," James said. "Spray the engine compartment. Buy us time." The elderly woman had her phone out recording everything, but this time for the right reasons. James found a loose piece of metal from the damaged light pole. He used it to carefully break away the cracked rear window, creating an opening large enough to reach through. Inside, the little girl was terrified, strapped into her car seat, crying hysterically. "Hey there, sweetheart," James said, his voice suddenly gentle despite the urgency. "My name's James. I'm going to get you out of here, okay? I need you to be brave for me. Can you be brave?" The little girl's crying quieted slightly. She nodded. James reached through the window. The broken glass cut his arm, blood mixing with the rain, but he didn't hesitate. His fingers worked the car seat straps, the same hands that had held dying soldiers now working to save a child's life. "Almost there, sweetheart. You're doing great. So brave." The flames were growing. Marcus was emptying the fire extinguisher, but it wasn't enough. They had maybe 30 seconds. Ranger, standing in the rain, began barking, not his trained, controlled bark, but an urgent, warning bark. He sensed danger. With a final click, the car seat came free. James pulled the little girl through the window, shielding her head from the broken glass with his bleeding arm. The moment they were clear, he ran, limping badly, pain shooting through his shrapnel-damaged leg, but running nonetheless, carrying the child away from the car. They were 15 feet away when the car's gas tank ignited. The explosion knocked James forward. He curled his body around the little girl, protecting her from the blast and the heat. They tumbled to the wet pavement together. Then Ranger was there, pressing against them both, his body providing additional protection and comfort. The mother ran to them, screaming her daughter's name. James gently handed the little girl to her mother. Both were crying, clutching each other. "Thank you," the mother sobbed. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Emergency vehicles arrived moments later. Paramedics rushed to the scene. One of them tried to check James's injuries, his bleeding arm, his leg that he couldn't put weight on, but he waved them off. "Check the child first. Make sure she's okay." The paramedic, a young woman who looked barely out of training, stared at him. "Sir, you're bleeding pretty badly." "I've had worse," James said quietly. "The child. Please." She nodded and went to examine the little girl, who was shaken but unharmed. The passengers from the bus had all disembarked. They stood in a semicircle around James, who was now sitting on the curb, Ranger pressed against his side. His hands were shaking, the adrenaline wearing off, the PTSD triggers starting to hit. But before the panic attack could fully take hold, Ranger did his job. The dog placed his paws on James's chest, applying pressure. Ranger's calm brown eyes locked with James's. "I'm okay, boy," James whispered. "I'm okay." Derek knelt beside him, holding an umbrella over James to shield him from the rain. Emily sat on his other side, having retrieved a blanket from the bus. The mother approached, still holding her daughter. The little girl's face was buried in her mother's shoulder. "I don't know how to thank you," the mother said, her voice breaking. "You saved my baby's life. You risked your life for someone you don't even know." James looked up at her, and despite his pain, despite his shaking hands, he smiled. "That's what we do," he said simply. "We protect people. It's who I am." The little girl lifted her head from her mother's shoulder, her eyes, wide and still frightened, fixed on Ranger. "Doggy brave," she said softly. James laughed, a real laugh, perhaps the first in years. "Yes, he is. Ranger is very brave." "You brave too," the little girl said, reaching out a small hand toward James. He took her tiny hand gently in his scarred, bleeding one. "We're all brave when we need to be, sweetheart, even when we're scared." A local news van pulled up. The elderly woman, who'd been recording everything on her phone, approached the reporter. "You need to tell this story," she said firmly. "This man was mocked and harassed on our bus less than an hour ago. People called him weak for having a service dog. They filmed him to mock him online. And then he did this. He saved that child's life without a second thought." The reporter, recognizing a powerful story, approached James. But Marcus, the bus driver, stepped between them protectively. "Give him space," Marcus said firmly. "He's a hero, but he's also a human being dealing with trauma. Show some respect." The reporter nodded and kept a respectful distance but continued filming. Derek, tears still streaming down his face, spoke up loudly enough for the camera to hear. "I'm the one who mocked him," he announced. "I'm the one who harassed him, made fun of his service dog, questioned his need for help. And then I watched him save a child's life. I watched him be everything I'm not, brave, selfless, heroic." He turned to the camera directly. "If you're watching this, learn from my mistake. Veterans with PTSD aren't weak. People with service dogs aren't faking it. And just because you can't see someone's wounds doesn't mean they aren't real. This man is a hero twice over, once for his service, and again today." What the elderly woman had filmed, James's story on the bus, followed by the dramatic rescue, was shared online within hours. But unlike the mockery Emily had planned, this went viral for the right reasons. News outlets across the country picked it up. Veterans organizations shared it. Mental health advocates shared it. Within 48 hours, Captain James Morrison's face was everywhere. But more importantly, the conversation changed. People started talking about invisible disabilities, about PTSD, about the judgment we place on others without knowing their stories, about service dogs and the incredible work they do. The video of Derek's apology and confession was particularly powerful. Men across the country, many of them veterans themselves, shared their own stories of struggling with PTSD, of needing help, of feeling judged. "If Derek can admit he was wrong, I can admit I need help," one viral tweet read. Fundraisers sprang up for service dog organizations. The program that had trained Ranger received enough donations to train 50 more service dogs. 2 weeks later, Marcus the bus driver received a call. It was from the local veterans organization. They wanted to honor both him and James at a ceremony. The ceremony was held at a community center. Hundreds attended: veterans, active duty service members, families, and many of the passengers from that fateful bus ride. James arrived with Ranger, wearing his dress uniform for the first time in years. He looked uncomfortable with the attention, but less haunted than before. Ranger, sensing the crowd, stayed close but seemed proud in his own way. The little girl he'd saved was there with her mother. When she saw James, she ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his leg. "Brave man," she exclaimed, "and brave doggy." James picked her up, laughing, and Ranger wagged his tail enthusiastically, receiving gentle pets from the child. Derek was there too. He'd started volunteering with veterans organizations, dedicating himself to spreading awareness about PTSD and invisible disabilities. He approached James nervously. "Sir, James stopped him with a raised hand. "You've done good work. Your brother would be proud." Derek's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. That means everything." Emily, the young woman who'd planned to mock James online, had become an advocate for mental health awareness among her generation. She'd even started a TikTok channel dedicated to educating people about invisible disabilities, service dogs, and veterans issues. "You changed my life," she told James. "I was heading down a path of cruelty disguised as humor. You showed me what real strength looks like." Marcus received a community service award. In his acceptance speech, he spoke about his own journey from homeless Marine to bus driver and about the importance of veterans helping veterans. But the biggest honor went to Ranger. The service dog organization that had trained him presented him with a special medal, the Valor Dog Award, given to service dogs who've gone above and beyond their training. As Ranger sat proudly with his medal, James knelt beside him. "Good boy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved me first, and then you helped me save someone else. You're the real hero, buddy." Ranger licked James's face, and the crowd erupted in applause. James was asked to speak. He stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. For a moment, the old fear tried to take hold. So many people, so much noise, so much chaos. But then he felt Ranger lean against his leg, grounding him, reminding him he was here, now, safe. "I want to tell you about the 17 soldiers who died under my command," James began, his voice steady. "Their names deserve to be remembered, not as casualties or statistics, but as people. Sons and daughters, husbands and wives, parents and friends." He listed each name, taking his time, honoring each one. The crowd listened in reverent silence. "They gave everything," James continued, "and for years, I felt like my survival was a betrayal of their sacrifice. I felt like I didn't deserve to keep living when they didn't get that chance." He paused, looking down at Ranger. "But this dog, this incredible, intuitive, loving dog, taught me something. He taught me that surviving isn't betraying the fallen. Living fully, helping others, finding purpose and meaning, that's how we honor them. That's how we make their sacrifice mean something." He looked back up at the crowd. "So to everyone watching, everyone struggling with invisible wounds, everyone fighting battles that others can't see, you're not weak. You're not broken. You're not less than. You're warriors fighting a different kind of war, and you deserve support, compassion, and respect. And to those who judge, who mock, who question the wounds they can't see, I ask you to remember this. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind. Be compassionate. Because you never know when that kindness might save a life." The applause was thunderous, but more important than the applause were the hands raised throughout the audience, veterans who'd been struggling in silence, now seeing they weren't alone. Family members who finally understood what their loved ones were going through. Young people who'd learned a crucial lesson about empathy and judgment. James Morrison continued riding the number 7 bus. Sometimes people recognized him. Most times they didn't. But the atmosphere on that bus route had changed. Passengers stood up for each other now. When someone was being harassed or judged, others spoke up. Derek rode that route too, and he never missed an opportunity to advocate for kindness. Marcus still drove the route, greeting each passenger warmly, watching out for anyone who might need a kind word or a helping hand. And Emily, the young woman who'd almost ruined James's life for internet clout, now used her platform to spread awareness. Her videos about invisible disabilities, service dogs, and veterans issues reached millions. But the biggest change was in James himself. He was attending group therapy with other veterans. He was mentoring younger vets struggling with PTSD. He was speaking at schools about service, sacrifice, and mental health. He was living. Not just surviving, but truly living. And through it all, Ranger was at his side, not just as a service dog, but as a friend, a companion, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is hope, there is help, and there is healing. The story of James Morrison and Ranger reminds us of several crucial truths. First, that heroism comes in many forms. Sometimes it's running into danger to save a child, but sometimes it's the quiet heroism of surviving trauma, of getting out of bed when everything in you wants to give up, of reaching out for help when society tells you to be strong and silent. Second, that our judgments of others are often based on incomplete information. The person you mock might be fighting battles you can't imagine. The weakness you perceive might be strength you don't recognize. Third, that service dogs aren't luxuries or emotional crutches for the weak. They're highly trained medical equipment for people with real, serious conditions. Mocking a service dog is like mocking someone's wheelchair or medication. And finally, that our words and actions have power. Derek's cruelty on that bus could have ended tragically. But his willingness to acknowledge his mistake, apologize genuinely, and change his behavior turned a moment of shame into a catalyst for growth, both for himself and for countless others who heard his story. If this story touched you, please like this video and share it. Stories like this need to be heard. And if you know a veteran who's struggling, reach out. Be the person who sees their invisible wounds and offers support instead of judgment. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity, our capacity for both cruelty and compassion, and the everyday heroes among us. James Morrison didn't set out to be a hero that day on the bus. He just wanted to make it through another commute with his service dog. But when the moment came, when a child needed saving, the warrior he'd always been emerged. Because here's the truth about heroes. They're not people without fear or trauma or wounds. Heroes are the people who carry those wounds and keep showing up anyway, who face their demons daily and still find the strength to help others, who turn their pain into purpose. Captain James Morrison is a hero not despite his PTSD, but because he learned to live with it, to acknowledge it, to use his experience to help others. And Ranger? Ranger is a hero because he does what all the best companions do. He stands beside his person in both the quiet moments and the crisis, unwavering in his dedication and love. This is their story. But it's also our story. A reminder that we all have the power to be either Derek at the beginning or Derek at the end. We can tear down or build up. We can judge or we can understand. We can mock or we can honor. The choice, as always, is ours. Thank you for watching. Please remember, be kind. You never know who might be a hero in disguise.